watching Goal Line Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Goal Line Extended on the Lacrosse Flash Podcast Network. Today is Tuesday, May 25, and I am your host, Ryan Hulsebos. Glad that you could join us as we get ready to look back at the quarterfinal round of the NCAA tournament. What a weekend it was as we watched 3 overtime games, and we'll now get a throwback ACC Final Four with North Carolina, Virginia, and Duke moving on, along with Maryland. A lot to talk about as we look ahead to Memorial Day weekend and the Final Four, with the semifinals to be played on Saturday. The Final Four set for Monday afternoon, of the final, set for Monday afternoon from Hartford, Connecticut. And joining me to break down this weekend's games will be Jordan Johnson, Flash writer and analyst, back again for today's show. And he's standing by and will join us in a few minutes. And then we will continue our Flash team previews ahead of the 2021 season, as today we will be talking about the new look Waterdogs Lacrosse Club, and Flash analyst and lacrosse insider Dan Arestia will be joining us, and the accompanying article will be available on lacrosseflash.com, as well as our other team previews, being that this is the 5th of 8, so make sure to check that out, and we will continue those over the next week and a half ahead of the 2021 season. Also available on lacrosseflash.com is Cannon's attackman and 2020 MLO champion Bryce Watson, as he talks about his journey to lacrosse and to the PLL on the second edition of Behind the Cage with John Lintz. Make sure to go check that out as well, as I welcome in Jordan Johnson to today's show. Jordan, what's going on, my man?
Same old, buddy. What's up, man?
Absolutely. Hey, same old. Nothing much, man. Hey, great weekend that we had. A lot of fun watching these games, because these were 3 really coming into this one. We kind of haven't had great quarterfinal games over the last couple of years. This was a great weekend of quarterfinal lacrosse. So I'm glad to have you joining us today after what was, again, one of the most exciting weekends really in the last couple of weeks. We haven't had a weekend quite like this, but we had a dull one to start off the weekend with Virginia and Georgetown. The Hoyas only managing 3 goals in a miserable loss to cap off what was a great season for Georgetown. But all 3 games to close out the weekend, like I said, giving us overtime lacrosse, and each kind of in a different way. UNC and Rutgers, they traded possessions. Duke and Loyola took almost the entire first period of OT, and then Maryland beat Notre Dame straight off the opening draw. No timeout. They went right to goal. So giving us a little bit of everything, including the first game of the weekend, which, like I said, was Virginia pressing on the gas pedal early and really just cruising over Georgetown behind 6 goals from Connor Kelly. He was, as Inside Lacrosse put it, sensational. He had an assist on the day as well. And then everybody else got in there on the scoring party as well. Matt Moore, Doc Aiken, Peyton Cormier, Charlie Bertrand, Xander Dixon, and then face-off specialist Petey LaSala. They each found the back of the net. Ian Laviano, he scored twice. And then the Virginia defense, you look at them as well. They held Georgetown to just 3 goals. Tewaaraton finalist Jake Carraway, he was held to just an assist. And just like that, UVA, the current defending champs, are headed back to the Final Four. And like I said, Schellenberger, phenomenal. His success usually translates well into team success there for UVA, but it was really the physicality of this Virginia team that stood out most from the opening face-off, where Jared Connors took James Riley to the ground. We barely saw any more of Riley in that game. And then Doc Aiken, he lit up defenseman Gibson Smith on that ride right in the middle of the field. Clean hit. Clean play, head was up, no cross check, shoulder right to the chest, but a very physical game, and Virginia just proved tougher in this one.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, you knew once James Riley got hurt, and even before that, where Kevin Warren got hit with the ball during warm-ups, you just knew something was off. But you mentioned James Riley again, and I believe we talked about it last week. It was going to be between him and Petey LaSala. Whoever was going to go above 50% was going to win. Obviously, you hate to see James Riley get hurt, man, but Petey LaSala, have yourself a day. Give him a pat on the back, because even when Riley got hurt, I did not expect him to be that dominant. And then you talk about Connor Kelly, man. He's just so fun to watch. It's going to be fun watching him and Brendan O'Neill go back and forth for ACC Player of the Year, and Tewaaraton's here to come, man. Lars just keeps recruiting. I picked Georgetown, regretfully so. It's unfortunate for them because they're such a program on a rise, and then you're going to talk about next year getting one of the best defenders in the country with Will Bowen transferring in there. They're going to be good next year, and to say that they will win the Big East next year is I can pretty well say that as my early prediction. But it's just tough to watch them lose, especially like that. Tough to see Jake Caraway go out like that. This probably ends his chances at the Towards Hot Award, especially with the performances of one Jarrett Bernhardt and even Michael Sowers and Pat Cavanaugh. But you have to give it to Lars and UVA because a lot of people, including myself, a lot of our analysts, didn't believe in them. We took the hot hand in Georgetown, and Lars has his team ready to play, man.
I was with you there. I had the hot hand in Georgetown as well, and you brought up there kind of the face-off differences, especially after not penalty. Well, I guess it was a penalty there on Jared Condren, but after the injury to James Riley, Cade Heverly came in. He took 2 draws. He won one of them, and Carson Milburn, who took the majority there of the draws after Riley went out, he only won 3 face-offs out of 15. So seeing that disparage there in face-off wins, Petey LaSala came in and he just continued to stay hot. He 15 and 19 on the day, so, continuing to play very well. And then, as you said, Georgetown's tournament run, unfortunately over, but very exciting stuff from what's become a Big East powerhouse over the past 3 seasons, and we're looking forward to what they can do here going forward in 2022. Virginia, on the other hand, advancing to their 25th Final Four appearance and their 2nd in a row, and they'll be taking on North Carolina after the Tar Heels took down Rutgers 12-11 in overtime in the 2nd game of Saturday's doubleheader, as Lance Tillman and Justin Anderson exploded for the Tar Heels. 4 goals for Tillman, who had a total of 5 coming into the game, and then a hat trick for Anderson. And Tewaaraton finalist Chris Gray, he also added 3 assists. And then on the other side, Adam Charlambides for Rutgers, 4 magnificent goals to keep the Scarlet Knights in this one, but failed clears at the end. What will come back to haunt the Scarlet Knights, but a fantastic game all around. North Carolina moving on.
Yeah, man. I think guy that we talked about just before in the last segment, Will Bowen, had a sneaky underrated game. Has hands full with guys like Kurst, Schoenbees, Mullins, and Sprock, but I really liked how he covered one-on-one, man. It seemed like he wasn't going to lose his matchup. It took Schoenbees having some of the magic that he had, just some absolutely sick goals, just to even beat him. And then on the other hand, on offense, you talk about Lance Tillman coming through, guy who only had, what you said, 5 goals coming in and having 3. That's just such a Joe Bresci type move to have him in on that second line when I believe Tanner Cook was hurt, where they kind of ran Herbert and Tillman. Tillman slid down to attack. Yeah, Cole Herbert coming out of the midfield. Just Joe Bresci, the way he game plans is just so fun to watch because you never know what he has up his sleeve. And he's always been like that, going back to his Calvert Hall days in high school. You watch how Calvert Hall in the MIA championship, you see reminiscence of the way that Joe Bresci used to run his teams, man. So overall, well done by Joe Bresci, but you got to give credit to Brian Brecht and Rutgers for holding them in there for the run that they've made, man. Colin Kurst, I'm frankly shocked he didn't get drafted in the BLO draft, and I think some coaches are going to be calling him this summer at some point because that man is a brick wall. And the fact that UNC was able to score as many as they did was honestly shocking. I thought it'd be more 10-9 game like Duke and Loyola were. But you got to give credit to Joe Bresci, Kevin Understein, and that staff, man. They had a game plan that was ready for Rutgers' NASCAR, quote-unquote, offense. So.
Absolutely. UNC coming out on top in this one. For Rutgers, tough way to end the season, though. Disappointing way to end the season. I was the only one that picked Rutgers in this one. You guys all had UNC, but definitely a disappointing way to end the season for Rutgers. But like Georgetown, a whole lot of promise heading into 2022 for Rutgers, and we'll imagine that they stay among the top in the Big Ten for the foreseeable future. But that sets us up for our first semifinal matchup this coming Saturday, UNC in Virginia, and what will be the third meeting between these two teams, the rubber match, as they've split the season series there in the ACC in 2 tightly contested contests. Looking ahead to this game, what are you most excited to watch?
I'm most excited to watch these two goalies and Krieg and Alex Rode. Who Alex Rode is a guy who always has that. He reminds me of Joe Flacco a little bit. Just he has these bumpy regular seasons, but then he gets into the playoffs and he just goes on a freaking roll, man. So I'm just interested to see how he holds up against some of those shooters like Nicky Solomon, like if Lance Tillman comes alive, like a Chris Gray. I'm really interested to see, and hopefully on the UNC side, Tanner Cook is fully healthy. I mean, Cole Herbert can get the job done out of the midfield. He's a great freshman. He's going to be up there with the Schellenbergers and O'Neal for years to come. But I'd really like to see what UNC's offense looks like with a healthy Tanner Cook and not just him playing the man up.
Absolutely hoping for a healthy Tanner Cook back in there. You brought up the Joe Flacco example. I'll bring up the Eli Manning example, being my team carrying two teams there to Super Bowl wins for 4 playoff wins they had to get. But like we had on Saturday, we had 2 more quarterfinals on Sunday, with the first being between Duke and Loyola, a game that we are growing pretty used to seeing come tournament time. We had Miles Jones on Friday's show, and he said that they played Loyola twice in the tournament during his time there alone. So these two programs getting used to each other over the years, and it resulted in this one going all the way to the distance as Duke's they survive off another Joe Robertson overtime goal, coming up clutch late yet again for the Blue Devils, as Duke will advance to the semifinals where they will play Maryland.
Yeah, man. On the Duke side of things, I'm just going to come out and say it. You need to unlock Michael Sowers with. I'm sorry, Coach Dino, Matt Danowski, Caputo, but you have not by now. If you haven't fully unlocked Michael Sowers, and Grant, he has 35 goals on the year or whatever it is right now. He's been amazing, but you've got to. This is his first and going to be his only NCAA tournament. You haven't fully unlocked him. Use him all over the field. I mean, credit to Loyola because they had a great defensive game plan. I actually was just watching that game in full a couple hours ago. I love the way they schemed up the rest of their offense. They pretty much dared Sowers to beat them, and which he did. It went by shutting down guys like Nakai Montgomery and even Robertson up until the overtime, where, of course, he came up clutch. But I want to see more of Michael Sowers being unlocked against Maryland. And then, like I said, on the Loyola side, they had great defensive game plan. Loyola is one of those Patriot League teams. They're going to come out. They're going to make it a scrap fest against these bigger teams. That's how all the smaller schools do it. Sam Schaefer stood on his hand. Credit to him. What a tournament for him. The goalie playing this tournament, as we were just talking about with Rode and Krieg, man, the goalie playing this tournament has been unbelievable. I would expect Mike Adler to have his best game here coming up against Maryland. I'm not sure if that's going to equate to a W quite yet, but as far as him going up against guys like Bernhardt next week and Wisnauskas and Fairman, I like his chances more than I would have probably told you about a month or two ago. But we'll see, man.
Absolutely. Mike Adler definitely playing better over the last couple weeks, definitely over the last month or so, but definitely goalie play has been better here in this tournament. We brought up some numbers there on Friday just about goalie play being really, really good there over that first round, obviously continuing here into the quarterfinal. We'll see if it continues into the Final Four, but during overtime, as these two teams kind of traded possessions, I just kept kind of telling myself, this Duke team, they're just too good to lose here, to lose now. Like, this team is built for Memorial Day weekend. The expectations were to get to Memorial Day weekend, and Joe Robertson and co have done just that, behind 4 goals from Freshman of the Year Brennan O'Neal, 3 assists from Tewaaraton finalist Michael Sowers, and then to face Duke in the semifinals, breaking up that all-ACC Final Four, is undefeated Maryland, even though Maryland was once a part of the ACC. So for some, this bringing back some old memories, but that was before my time. So props to Maryland for knocking off Notre Dame and keeping this Final Four from turning into an all-ACC affair. But 2 overtime games on quarterfinal weekend. How about 3, as Maryland won the opening faceoff, secured possession, and then opting not to call a timeout, won the game less than a minute into overtime off an Anthony DeMeo, Logan Wisnauskas give and go, capping off a phenomenal weekend. Tewaaraton finalist Jake Bernhardt scored 5 goals. Wisnauskas scored a hat trick along with that assist, and DeMeo had 3 assists to go along with his OT game winner. Big win for the Terps as they're headed back to championship weekend.
Yeah, man, and this is an all ACC Final Four because you say it's before your time. We're the same age, and I grew up on Maryland basketball in the ACC, Maryland lacrosse in the ACC. This is an all Final Four. Anyone in this entire state of Maryland can tell you that, buddy. The Big Ten move that's a different conversation. Anyways, on the Maryland side of things, it was nice to see other pieces besides Bernhardt get more involved. Fairman, Wisnauskas, DeMeo with the game winner. We all know what those guys are capable of. I just wanted to quite see it in the clutch. That's why I frankly picked Notre Dame. And then on the Notre Dame offense side of things, I mean, it's the same thing. They didn't get what Maryland got, which was more scoring around Kavanaugh. And I mean, we know what kind of player Pat Kavanaugh is, but Maryland's defensive game plan for him was just phenomenal, man. And even with that, him having himself the game that he did, credit to him. Credit to Maryland for hanging in there at the face-off X against Gallagher and Leonard. But as far as Maryland moving here forward against Duke, I like their offense. I like their chances. Like I said with Duke, I think Mike Adler's going to have himself a game, but I think Maryland's going to get some good looks, especially early on. I think it's going to take a little bit for a team like Duke to adjust to a faster offense that Maryland has. Frankly, might be one of the faster running gun type of offenses that they've seen all year. But it's going to be an interesting matchup. And then on the offensive side for Duke, how do you handle Grill and Makar? Because you have two number ones, and I'm really interested to see which guy that Maryland puts on Sowers and which guy they put on O'Neal, and that were maybe in this game compared to the game against Loyola, you see a guy like Nakai Montgomery come through. Now, I do like Maryland shorties better than I did Loyola's and Kaufman and Alex Smith, but there might be some opportunity for a guy like Nakai Montgomery to beat those guys. He's just as good and can hang with anybody in the country, man. So it's going to be a fun matchup to watch, man.
Absolutely. Duke and Maryland looking like, obviously, both of these matchups looking like great games to watch. Virginia and UNC looking like the first game that we'll get. Duke and Maryland. The second will have more times solidified there by Friday. We'll have time set up. But going back to Notre Dame, a very tough loss and a very abrupt end to their season. Who came in, they looked like all the right ingredients for them kind of coming together for a national championship run after bringing in a few graduate transfers, especially at attack, defense, and at faceoff. We watched the emergence of Pat Cavanaugh, a Tewaaraton finalist. He's not going anywhere, fortunately, as he's just a sophomore. But really, just all in all, a tough way to end the season if you're the Irish.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you say Kavanaugh's not going anywhere. Thank God they have the other brother coming in, man, because they're going to lose a lot. And I think people are going to look back and be like, whoa, you're losing your two face-off guys. You're losing your two top defenders. Will York, wasn't he a graduate transfer? He might have another year, give or take, on it with the system and whatnot. But for Notre Dame, you're going to Kevin Corrigan. He's going to have a plan for next year. I'm not going to really say that they're going to be good or bad next year. I want to see how they handle everything with this transfer portal, which opens up. You can't really make predictions this early, as in years past, you would kind of know who's coming in and whatnot. But with this transfer portal, man, anything can happen. So wouldn't put it past Kevin Corrigan to kind of reload again.
Absolutely. Maybe a few names through the Ivy League that might have been seniors this year looking to play again in college lacrosse next year. So definitely opportunity to add some names via the transfer portal. But the college lacrosse season coming to a close, and with that, we crown another champion. Will it be Virginia to repeat, or will it be UNC, Duke, or Maryland to take home the title? Very exciting stuff as we look ahead to the weekend, and make sure to tune in on Friday as we look ahead to these two semifinal games. Jordan, I want to thank you for joining me today as we look back at the quarterfinal round of the NCAA tournament. Dan Arestia will be joining me next to talk about the Waterdogs Lacrosse Club. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
Time Extended presented by Lacrosse Flash.
Welcome back to the show as we continue our 2021 PLL team previews ahead of training camp, which starts this Friday, and then the 2021 PLL season, which begins Friday, June 4th, so about a week and a half away. So coming up very, very quickly, and we are now 2 weeks away into our team previews ahead of this season. We had Austin Owens and the Cannons, and then Jordan Johnson, the Archers, 2 weeks ago. Last week, Pat Gregoire joined me in looking at the defending champs, the Whipsnakes, and then Austin Owens came back to offer his thoughts on the Redwoods on Friday's show. So make sure to check any of those shows out if you're interested in hearing more about those four teams. We also had some pretty cool interviews with some of the best players in the game, so make sure to check that out as well. And today, we will continue our team previews with the 2020 PLL expansion team, the Waterdogs, who come into 2021 after a pretty busy offseason, landing a few big names in trades as well as in both drafts after a disappointing one-win campaign in Utah, last summer. And joining me to talk about the Waterdogs today is Flash analyst and lacrosse insider Dan Arestia. Dan, welcome to the show. Glad you could join us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Hey, great to have you back on the show, Dan, as we get set for the PLL season, which all officially gets going this weekend in Boston as the league gets training camp underway. It'll start on Friday and run through next Thursday, June 3rd, so almost a full week of camp here over Memorial Day weekend and then into the beginning of next week in preparation for week one. And in talking with a few players off air after some of these interviews that we've had for the show over the last few weeks. And then we had Redwoods head coach Nat St. Laurent last week in a GLE special that's available on the Flash YouTube channel. So anyone that is interested, make sure to check that out. But it seems like most guys are traveling out to Boston in the middle of this week as the league needs to conduct certain COVID protocols. What are you hearing in regards to the severity of these protocols? And then with the guys that are vaccinated or in the process of being vaccinated or guys that aren't vaccinated, how is the league handling those instances as they prepare for this weekend and then for week one?
Well, the league's got their protocol out there, right? There's certain protocols where if you're vaccinated, your life is just going to be a lot easier than if you aren't. If you're not a vaccinated player or you're not able to get one or you have chosen for whatever reason to not be vaccinated before the season starts, it'll result in you having a little more limited interaction with other players in the league, as you can imagine, a little more isolation and things like that as the year goes on until you can get vaccinated. And I imagine there's the 2 week period after you get vaxxed too, where you have to maintain isolation. But the league had set their goal, I think, at having north of 90% of their players vaccinated in time for the season to start. I would imagine, and it sounds to me from what I've heard, that they're on track to do that. A lot of guys here in the States have been able to get vaccinated. I think some Canadian players have made their way south of the border and will be in the States for the duration of the summer, either getting vaccinated and participating and then just living here until the season ends. So, I would imagine we have a COVID-free season, knock on wood. I know, some leagues, like in baseball, even though guys are vaccinated now, you're still seeing the occasional outbreak. I know the Yankees here near me in New York had an outbreak in their coaching staff. And those are with guys who were vaccinated, so you still have to be careful. But, I think the majority of the players, coaches, have gotten vaccinated at this point, and they're itching to get to training camp.
Absolutely. As the vaccine kind of becoming more available, everybody kind of jumping on board and getting the vaccine. I got my first dose just last week, so kind of getting the ball rolling on all of that, but ensuring the safety of the players and the fans as the league welcomes them back to the stands, placing that towards the top in importance as we look over the horizon here at the 2021 season. But speaking of camp, this is the third training camp the PLL is holding, obviously, for the third season. And last year's camp, compared to the inaugural season in 2019, under a much larger lens with college lacrosse being canceled in early March. We were without sports for the majority of the spring and early summer, so there was a lot of excitement around last year's abbreviated camp in Utah as fans embraced the league's return. And the league gave us a pretty good insight kind of in terms of how the practice schedule was going to be laid out. We saw some highlights from a few scrimmages. What are you hearing in regards to those practice schedules? And then with camp scrimmages, I'd imagine we also see a few of those.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to, you can go buy a ticket and go see them yourself. There's, you can get tickets on the cheap. It's a tough time to get there, but if you can get to Gillette on a Tuesday in the afternoon, you can go see these guys play, which is, I wish I could do it. I'd love to be able to go do that, but something you are hearing is that for some of these guys who weren't maybe in the league in year one, or some of these guys who are, for like the Waterdogs in particular, these are guys who are excited about having a full-fledged training camp. You called, last season's in the bubble abbreviated, and I think that's fair. That was kind of, we got to get guys in and get you settled, and you had to deal with the protocols and the isolation and everything to get in there. And then camp was a little bit shorter than it was in year one. And, I think some of these guys are anxious to have the real training camp because it does a lot for your team, and it does a lot to get your new guys acclimated to the other guys that are already in your locker room. So I think there's an excitement, primarily because we're getting back to pro lacrosse season, but also because it feels more like a real camp this time, closer to how it did with the excitement of year one is what you're getting in year three.
Absolutely. And then we're seeing, too, on social media, some of these guys meeting up, training with each other. We're kind of seeing these guys getting together in groups. We saw a little bit of that ahead of Utah last summer, but obviously being that we were kind of right in the middle of COVID-19 and kind of our fight against that, we weren't kind of pushing for that too much. We weren't trying to encourage that as much as we are now, obviously, being that we're kind of on the other side of the virus, or at least getting towards that. But training camp right around the corner, very exciting stuff as we continue to look ahead and get ready for the 2021 season. Now, training camp starts on Friday, but there will be a select number of guys that will be playing in East Hartford, Connecticut on Saturday for a chance to play in the NCAA Division I championship game on Monday. 8 players actually in total, not including Maryland's Jared Bernhardt. So in terms of those guys joining their respective teams, what's the timeline looking like ahead of week 1 in Boston or week 2 in Atlanta? And how do you expect their absences, for some guys, I guess more than others, how do you expect their absences to affect how some of these head coaches approach training camp and then in getting their rosters down to 25?
Well, it probably depends a little bit on the guy. I mean, of the 8 guys, 4 of them are first-round picks, and those are the guys where you would expect, obviously, for them to have more of an impact. Some of those guys who maybe were later-round picks that, the coaches were selecting maybe as depth dads or guys they didn't necessarily expect to be roster impacts in week 1. Are the Whipsnakes going to miss Nick Grill in week 1 if he misses a little bit of training camp? Probably not. It'd be better to have him there so he can get in with the other guys, especially being a Maryland guy. But it's going to be the situation where they probably feel like they've got their guys ready, in terms of their lineup that they're going to put on the field in week 1. But will the Chrome wish JT Giles Harris was there right away? Yeah, they probably do. He's probably a guy they expect to play for them, to start for them in week 1. So, it kind of depends on the personnel. In terms of timeline, I don't know. I don't know if these coaches will be like ringing these guys up minutes after they lose a game on Saturday and be like, all right, get on the next plane or whatever, the next bus, I guess. They don't even need a plane ride. But, coaches, I think, will give these guys a few days to wind their college season down and then get them into camp to get the pro season started. But, I would think a guy like Sowers or a guy like JT, who you're expecting to be an impact player in week 1, you want those guys there as soon as you can get them there.
Probably imagining that to be week 2 maybe in Atlanta, especially for these guys that we might see play on Monday. Obviously, as you're saying, you don't want to get a guy, they lose maybe Saturday or they lose on Monday, or let's say they win on Monday. You don't want to say, oh, we're going to grab these guys right away, get them into playing for pro lacrosse right off the bat. Obviously, we want to see them as soon as possible, but give them some time to celebrate their season, reflect on their season, obviously unwind before they get going here in the 2021 summer. But definitely a lot to think about as we approach training camp and the season, which again begins the weekend of Friday, June 4. And then on Monday, June 7, the PLL waiver and trade windows will reopen for the season. So a lot to watch as we get closer and closer to the 21 season. And then as we approach the season, it's time for new uniforms to start being unveiled. As yesterday, the Cannons revealed their white and navy blue uniforms, which have a little tie-dye smoke thing going on there at the bottom. And I say it like that because I don't really know what is going on down there with the jerseys. They look pretty clean to begin with, just as the solid at the top and the bottom, but we're expecting, I guess, the rest of these uniforms to roll out over the week. If we get new uniforms this season, we got new ones last year. But what was your initial reaction there to these new Cannons jerseys?
Yeah, I liked them right up until that last 3 inches of the shirt. Right, I thought the solid color, the blue and the white, both looked really nice. The white jersey I thought was gorgeous looking. I really like the look of those. The crest is great. I think there's a great meeting of original old, MLL Cannons logos and look and feel melded with, the sort of modern and the updated look that we've come to expect from a PLL jersey. The tie-dye and like the smoking thing, I'm an old guy. It doesn't really float my boat, but I am aware that that's like a thing that's in style, and that's a thing that a younger demographic really likes. So I would imagine that they like that a little more. And then I'm blanking on who said it, but somebody on Twitter was like, you know what? All these guys are tucking in their jerseys anyway. No one's even going to see it. So, yeah, once they tuck the jersey in, it's going to look sharp. But yeah, the top 90% of the jersey, I think, is a home run. I think they're gorgeous. The little smoke thing is not for me, but for some people, they think it looks cool. I realize, again, the younger demo thinks it looks great. So, go nuts, guys.
Looking forward to seeing what their helmets look like. Again, we should probably get that over the next couple of days, but definitely a different style, but seeing a lot of resemblance to kind of the Waterdogs uniform from last season. And then, we'll wait to see as the rest of the teams most likely roll out theirs sometime during this week. All right, time to talk about some Waterdogs lacrosse as Andy Copeland travels to training camp with arguably one of the most improved rosters from last season, adding starting level talent at almost every position this offseason. And let's start with the specialist. Jake Withers returns after a very successful first season in the PLO. He ranked third in the league in face-off winning percentage in Utah last summer. And Coach Copeland, after losing Drew Simino in expansion, went out and grabbed Casey Dowd after the college draft, who split time with new Chaos faceoff man Max Adler in 2020 with the Denver Outlaws. He recorded a 54% clip, and he will compete alongside Withers this summer, making up what looks like one of the stronger duos at the stripe in the league this summer, similar to what we kind of thought last summer with Withers and Simino splitting reps. How are you making sense here of this faceoff situation for the Waterdogs?
I think you feel really good about Withers. Like you said, he was third in the league last year. He was north of 60%. And I think you can feel pretty good about Casey Dowd, too. I think something that's interesting is that they lost Drew Simino, as you said. Drew Simino went in expansion to the Cannons, so they don't have him anymore. And an interesting, part of that is the Waterdogs had two very successful guys, right? Simino was really, really good for them, too.
Simino might have ranked fourth in the league.
Yeah, he ranked fourth in the league in terms of faceoffs won and percentage. So part of it is, you look at also the number of faceoffs that they each took, and it's not, wildly different. So there was really like a good split there where both guys were getting reps, and it's hard to understand how much maybe that contributes to their success if the other team, can't match up with one very well, the other one's taking faceoffs and winning, or is the change of pace something that the other team's faceoff man is having a hard time adjusting to? Having that 1-2 punch is it's tough with a shorter game day roster, but if you have two guys like that who are maybe feeding off each other really well and driving each other to success, then that's a great thing to have. And the Waterdogs don't have that combo anymore. If Casey Dowd can step in and do the same thing, I think obviously Andy Copeland's going to feel great if he's got two guys who are over 60% again. And you still feel really good about Withers, but the change in the position from a personnel group standpoint, I think is something that's interesting to watch for the Waterdogs.
Absolutely. With the PLL and MLL merger this offseason, a ton of talent coming in at the position in the college draft. The Waterdogs looking like they have one of the stronger units in the league, and we'll see how Withers and Dowd fare this season. Let's move on to the goalie position, because I mentioned starting level talent being added by Coach Copeland this offseason, whether it be through drafts or via trade, and he made 3 big trades, this one being the one to cap it all off at the deadline. Dylan Ward, arguably one of the best goalies in the world, comes over from the Chaos for midfielder Ian McKay and the Waterdogs' first round pick, in next year's college draft. A huge upgrade at the goalie position. You have Ward presumably as the starter, and Charlie Cipriano, who Copeland coached for 4 years at Fairfield and drafted last year in expansion, making this final Waterdogs roster. As this defense will look a lot different in 2021 as well, led by Ward. And what led you to taking Cipriano over the 8th overall pick in the 2020 college draft, Matt DeLuca?
Yeah, I think it's really just a trust between Copeland and Cipriano. If you told me in the morning, hey, he took DeLuca and not Cip, I wouldn't be shocked. They did spend a college draft pick on him. DeLuca's a really good goalie, and he got some minutes in games where the Waterdogs were getting shelled a little bit and looked okay, made some good saves. He's another of those sort of big, rangy, I think he's 6'5", so tall, really moves well goalie. So, I think it's not like a cut and dry thing. Like, all right, Ward and Zip and DeLuca. Sorry, I think it could easily be Ward and DeLuca. But obviously the acquisition of Dylan Ward was, it's adding what many people consider to be the best goalie in the world to your roster. And I think all of us as lacrosse fans are happy with this trade because we get to see Dylan Ward in a net and not on a sideline, which is where you want to see him. You want to see this guy play. He's, the way he plays and attacks the ball from an arc that he moves on as a goalie is as high as any arc there is that you'll see somebody play on in field lacrosse. He's just a master at cutting these angles and giving guys just nothing to shoot at. At times it looks like he's playing from outside the crease even. He plays so far out. So he's fascinating to watch, and he's so good at what he does. So, that's an end of the field where I thought the Waterdogs really needed help with the defensive end. And you add a backstop there as good as Dylan Ward, and you're feeling already a lot better about your defense.
Absolutely. Definitely better to see Dylan Ward out there on the field in goal than on the sideline. I'd imagine roasting there sitting in Utah. It was like 104 degrees. He had sweatpants and a long sleeve t-shirt shirt on. I don't know how he was doing it. But this Waterdogs defense seeing consistent improvements throughout this offseason after the expansion loss of Brody Merrill with this Dylan Ward trade to cap it off. But only 4 Poles that played in Utah last summer remain on this roster, with Chris Sabia and BJ Grill returning, along with Ryland Reese, one of the top LSMs in the game, and Noah Richard, who we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But Brian Karalunas, after being drafted by Copeland in expansion last year, he was released and then reacquired, and then Liam Burns and Ben Randall were drafted in the entry draft, with Eli Gobrecht acquired in a trade during the college draft. So a steady mix of guys returning, a steady mix of guys coming in. How do you expect this defensive unit to look come week 1?
I think it's going to look really different than it did last summer.
Oh, yeah.
Last summer, they looked at times like a group that hadn't played together much, which they hadn't. They had the really short camp. They were all picked from other teams, and some of them, were guys that maybe didn't play all that consistently for the team that they came from. So, we kind of just had like this mishmashed unit out there with, Poles who hadn't played together much, and then also you had some short sticks who were not, really doing a whole lot of positive work for you on the field. I thought their short stick D-Midi game was really, really tough last summer. So, they'll be better there. But I think, when you have a more organized defense, which is what you're going to get when you add Liam Burns in particular, it's just such a good help defender who's so versatile that he can win a cover matchup for you, but you can also trust him to be like your best off-the-ball defender if you need him to be that in a game and get other guys moving where they need to be. That's exactly the kind of player that the Waterdogs needed to add. They needed some more of that off-ball help, first kind of player, somebody who's going to get you organized a little better. So you go back and just watch some of their tape. You see there are games where, there's at times just no second slide happening, which, you can't have that happen, at a youth game level, let alone at the professional level. These are guys who will punish any tiny little mistake on a rotating defense that's 3 steps further away from a 2-slide. So, an organized defense is really something that they needed to build, and I think they got guys that can do that.
Noah Richard, I brought his name up there before. He isn't officially on the military exempt list, but we are aware of his military obligations. You have him making this 25-man roster. What do you know of his availability, and should we expect to see him each week going forward?
I think it's tough to say. I don't know enough about his military eligibility to be able to say for sure one way or another, and I don't want to speak out of turn and start a rumor about some guy's roster chances as we get close to camp here. I put him on the list because he's too good a player to keep off of it. Absolutely. Pretty much. I think the Waterdogs have their lead LSM in Ryland Reese. This is the guy who starts for Team Canada at LSM. This is as good as you're going to find in the league. He might not get some of the pub or be on, as many of the Instagram highlights and all that, but he is as good as there is in the world. So they have their lead LSM already. And I think Richard is a nice guy to spell him because I think they have very similar skill sets and their strengths are very aligned. And I think Richard is also a guy you can drop down low when you need to, because Burns is a guy you can play up top if you wanted to try and, split your LSM time that way. I think they've got some flexibility there with those 3 guys in particular to kind of just shuffle to where they need guys in particular situations and against particular teams. So, I hope that Richard is available. I don't know enough about his military availability to say, and I wouldn't want to try and speculate because we're talking about roster spots and guys' jobs, so I wouldn't want to try and go down that road.
Just thinking of Richard, though, with those military obligations, if he were to be placed on that exempt list, he would remain with the Waterdogs, just not a part of that 25-man roster. And then you brought up Ryland Reese. We will push Ryland Reese as much as we need to. All-world LSM there, all-world defenseman for Team Canada, being one of the best LSMs in the game, one of the best two-point shooting LSMs there in the game. But the defense looking much improved ahead of this season. We will wait and see how Copeland and his staff plans to put together this unit, as well as with the short stick defense. You brought them up before. You have Kyle McClancy and Stephen DiNapoli returning. Dan Epp there as well, one of the fastest players in the game, with Christian Scarpello and Matt Witcher. They're currently on the roster, both waiver additions. You have them not making this team, but we'll see how this unit looks ahead of training camp. Let's move on to the midfield. Not as many additions compared to what Copeland addressed elsewhere. He brings in Mikey Schlosser. You have him making up this offensive midfield with the likes of a healthy Zach Currier, Conor Kelly, Ben McIntosh, and Drew Snyder. And keyword there, healthy Zach Currier, as he missed some time in 2020 after what was his first play in the PLO, a big collision there after that first faceoff there on really right around the goal. With Currier healthy, the key addition there of Schlosser, and then Conor Kelly playing in a more definitive role as a midfielder with all those attack additions there by Coach Copeland. How improved do you expect this offense as a whole to be starting in the midfield?
I think they'll be a lot better. I think, with Currier, he had the concussion, and I don't even know if they ever actually diagnosed it as a concussion, but I've watched that play 100 times. There's no way that guy didn't have a concussion. But anyway, I think he missed some time in that same game. I think in terms of like games played and games he was available for, they said he was ready to be out there, but I'm not sure he ever really was 100% right after that initial collision last summer. So, I think having him healthy, like you said, is huge. This is a guy who was the first overall pick in an entry draft that had Rob Pennell in it. So, that's a testament to, number one, his skill set and what Coach Copeland thinks he can do in the league, and also just how valuable he is on both ends, because he is a real two-way midi. We mentioned the short stick defensive midfield game being kind of weak for the Waterdogs. I think the rest of the upgraded defense and like the organization that we already talked about helps that. But I think Currier being healthy helps that too, because he is also a very good defensive short stick player who can give you a shift at both ends before you sub him off. So I think Currier's health helps a lot on that end. I think, Schlosser has played with Currier already in Denver. I think he is as smart of a passing midfielder as you'll find coming over from the MLL. He's a really, really talented downhill dodger. He's physical and can run by a shorty if you give him one, and draw a slide and then make the right pass and make it well, like 10 times out of 10. So when you have that somebody who understands where the ball needs to be and can get it there all the time as a dodging midfielder, that's very, very valuable. And that's what Schlosser brings. And then Kelly, like you said, is versatile in that, the meme when he was in college was, what position does Conor Kelly play? There were All-American votes having him at midfield, All-American votes having him at attack. Kind of played both for Maryland his senior year there, and he kind of still plays both in the PLL. So, if you want to move him into an invert game if he gets short sticked, then you're feeling great about that. If you want to put him on wings, if you want to have him alley dodge and throw back, and then he has 2-point range. So, the Waterdog midfield all of a sudden gives opposing defenses a very difficult question, because even two-polling it might not be enough. Like, if you feel like you're okay two-polling their attack and trying to just pull Sowers and maybe leave a shorty on whoever out there you feel like you can get away with it if you have gifted shorties, there's still going to be a short stick midi out of Schlosser, Currier, Kelly that can really, really hurt you if your defense isn't backed up well behind them.
Absolutely. This midfield should be much improved here in 2021. And the attack should, as well, as Copeland loses Ryan Drenner to expansion. But before losing him, he traded his second-round pick in the college draft for Ryan Brown. And with his first-round pick in that draft, he took Duke's Michael Sowers, you brought his name up before. And then in the 4th round, Copeland selected Denver's Ethan Walker, who will compete for a roster spot with the likes of Michael Krause, another attackman who is quote-unquote added this offseason as he was drafted 3rd overall by Copeland last year, comes over after choosing the MLL in 2020. But these 4 guys joined Ben Reeves, a Tewaaraton winner, Christian Cuccinello, and Kieran McCart, who I have as my slept-on under-the-radar MVP here in 2021, especially with all these other offensive additions. But how do you expect this attack to look, this offense as a whole, really? Because taking into account we might see some of these guys kind of come out of the box as midfielders kind of running in that situation. And then you talked about, too, how you pull this offense. You might pull 2 attackmen, let's say, but you might even have another attackman running out of the midfield. How do you expect this offense to look, especially with all this attack talent?
I think you can pretty much, if it's me, I'm pretty locked in on having Sowers and Brown out there, likely with McCardle to start. If Reeves is available to play as a lefty, that's great. If he's off becoming Dr. Reeves, then that's even better for him. I think obviously he's got a gift as a brilliant student and has dreams that are loftier than pro lacrosse. As he has said without sarcasm that his goal is to cure cancer. And I think he's the kind of guy who can do it. So good luck to you. If he's off becoming Dr. Reeves, I hope he is. That's great news for everybody else in the world. But I think, other guys on that roster, Cuccinello ran out of the midfield a little bit for the Archers while he was there. And I think he's a guy who can win a physical matchup with an undersized short stick D-midi or just somebody who's just not a pole. His experience doing that already makes me think that's where he'll likely be for the Waterdogs, is running out of the box for them. And again, creating matchup problems, because then if you run him with even 2 of the 3 guys from that first group, then you're feeling good. If you're running him out there with Drew Schneider and Cuccinello are out there, then those are 2 guys that you're going to want to pull, and you can't. So, I think that sort of flex gives them a lot of help. And I actually really liked the Ethan Walker pick late in the draft for Coach Copeland. I think he's really, really good shooter. He's a decent dodger, but his strength will be in playing away from the ball and getting some time and room shots out of those 2 and 3 man kind of games that they can run with guys like Courier and Schlosser, from that side of the field. So he can be successful, Walker can, without having the ball in his stick a lot in this offense. And there's going to be a lot of guys who need touches. You're going to want, to get Sowers the ball a lot. You're going to want McCardle and Courier and Schlosser to get their chances to dodge. So, I think having a guy like that who is a really good shooter and kind of fits with this rest of this group, doesn't need the ball a ton, is a nice guy to add. So I like his chances actually to make this, even though he was a late round pick in the college draft.
Absolutely. And the Waterdogs looking to field one of the top offensive units here in 2021, backed by a few of these additions. Yet, as of last Monday, 11-1 odds to win the championship in September, tied for the best odds of any team. So with all these additions, not a bad bet here if you're trying to sprinkle some money around on a team to win it all. Yeah,
I mean, I love those odds to the Waterdogs. I've kind of said, I think they had as good or as an offseason as anybody in the league did. I think you can really make a strong case that they had the best offseason in the league. We like to point to the Woods and to Coach Nat as being this guy who loves to make these trades and wheel and deal. But, at the end of the day, through the trade market, the Waterdogs acquired Ryan Brown. They acquired Eli Gobrecht. They acquired Dylan Ward. Like, they were adding world championship caliber players in the trade market. They came out of the college draft with Eli Gobrecht and Ryan Brown essentially as 2 draft picks. Like, that's unbelievable. Those are guys that are going, if they're just college players, in the first round, maybe in the second round at the very latest. So, adding those kind of guys on top of adding a Sowers and a Schlosser and guys who you can trust already to just be quality pros that are going to contribute for you. I think the Waterdogs had as good an offseason as anybody. I'm one of those people who, would throw some money on the Waterdogs to be there at the end. It's tough to bet against the Whips, of course, but of the non-Whips teams, I feel really, really good about the Waterdogs. I really, really love their offseason. We didn't even mention that they hired Matt Bachlet to be a DC, who's
absolutely just recently announced.
Yeah, so again, we're talking about having a defense that's on the same page, that's organized, that's going to win matchups, and is going to be there winning ground balls and help defenders. It sounds like we're describing Matt Bachlet as we say this is what the Waterdogs need to be better at. So I couldn't imagine a better hire for this defensive group. I really, really love what they've done this offseason. I really think they're going to be good.
The Waterdogs looking forward here to a big turnaround in 2021 after kind of a disappointing 2020. Only had that one win in game number 4 there of the round robin play. But looking to turn around here in 2021. Dan, I appreciate you joining me as we look at the Waterdogs Lacrosse Club ahead of training camp in the 2021 season. Then some jersey reveals, some more training camp information for all of our lucky viewers and listeners as we quickly approach this season. Dan, before I let you go, World Lacrosse unveiled its Sixes brand last week, which looks like a hybrid between box and traditional field lacrosse. Austin and I gave our input on it last week. Miles Jones, who joined us on Friday, was a part of the team working on that project and demoing the game. He gave us some of his thoughts, some insight of kind of how he thinks the game will be played. I'm just interested. What are your thoughts on it, and what looks like will be the game that we will see representing lacrosse in the LA Olympics in 2028?
I think it looks like a ton of fun to play. I think the rule set in terms of, watching guys that are pros do it and me as like somebody who played many, many years ago, it looks like it's a ton of fun to play. But my hang up has been, and I've said this before, we're adding another discipline to how this sport is played. It's another rule set. It's another way to play the game. And it's probably going to find some new fans in the Olympics. If you add lacrosse to the Olympics, people are going to watch it. But what happens when somebody watches it, they say, I want to try this, and then the next spring they go out for their local team, and they find out we don't actually play by those rules except for during the Olympics. So every 4 years we do that. This is how we do it out here, so they have to do something different. That's not to say you're going to turn them off. You've still, gained probably some new fans, which is what the idea is here. But that kind of thing, it seems like we need to get on the same page about what we want field lacrosse to look like, what we want box lacrosse to look like, and try and streamline our rule sets a little bit. I know playing sixes, the barrier to entry for places around the world is going to be a lot lower. You don't need to find 20 guys to have a game. You need to find 12, really kind of like 10. So, everybody has the same stick. It's a much smaller field. It's much more accessible to people, which is, again, something you want. And I think that's what we're trying to balance here. But, again, a new discipline. And for me, when I did play way back when, I was a defenseman. And I guess, the things that I was used to doing on a lacrosse field just aren't part of this game. As a long stick player who, I tried to play aggressively and cause turnovers. That was just the way I had fun playing. I don't know if there's a spot for me in sixes. So, I was thinking about the way I play and reading the rules and being like, wow, I don't know if I could make it. I don't know if a team would want me in this. And I played and been around lacrosse a long time. That kind of hurts. So, I think something like this is good because if you build this and at a youth level, if you have your 8 and 10-year-olds out there on a sideways field with nets playing sixes and learning some game concepts that way, great. If that's the way you introduce them, great. But we need to decide if this is the way we're going to play all the time, or we need to decide if this is where we're going to play until we're 10, or we need to get our ducks in a row a little bit about what the rules of field lacrosse are at varying levels and how a player navigates them as they go from being a youth player to a high school player, college player, pro player. If it's wildly different, then it's kind of unfair to the player to be like, all right, now you have to learn something totally new. And you have to do that every few years, basically until you get to be a pro. And then you get to play that way for, 5 or 6 years. Enjoy. I think that's kind of a tough ask.
Definitely tough because me and Austin were talking about it last week. It's like college lacrosse and high school lacrosse is different from pro lacrosse, which is different from women's lacrosse, and obviously different from box lacrosse. It's like all these different disciplines of the game. They're so much different. Now we're adding yet another one. It just kind of makes it even more confusing. But definitely, as you're saying, excited to see lacrosse represented in the Olympics. Obviously, hopefully a larger demographic that we're going to be able to reach through lacrosse sixes, but it will probably look a little bit different than what we are accustomed to. But obviously, excited for change. We embrace change here. And hoping that we can see this excel and do very well. But Dan, thank you again for joining us as we look ahead to the Waterdogs and ahead to training camp here in 2021. But that is going to do it for today's show here of Goal Line Extended. I want to thank you all for watching and or listening. If you are not already, make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube as well as on whatever podcast platform that you use. You can also head on over to lacrosseflash.com. All of our podcasts are there as well as Dan's preview for the Waterdogs ahead of this season, and the first 4 season previews that we have done are also there. So make sure to check that out and keep your eyes open for our last 3 that we will be rolling out over the next 2 weeks. And new on the Flash site as well, Cannon's attackman and 2020 MLO champion Bryce Watson talks about his journey to lacrosse and to the PLL on the 2nd edition of Behind the Cage with John Lintz. Make sure to check that out. You can also follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended. All of the links that you will need will be in the description of the video or podcast that you're viewing or listening to right now. And we will be back on Friday to look ahead to championship weekend as we have our semifinal matchup set for Saturday. We'll see who punches their ticket to Memorial Day's championship game on Monday. And we'll have another team and guest as we continue our PLL team previews and then whatever other news that we get in the world of lacrosse. Tune in Friday so that you do not miss it. I hope you all have an incredible week, and we will see you on Friday.
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at GL Extended and subscribe to the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets. You can find Lacrosse Flash on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and online at lacrosseflash.com.